Okay, so I hope I can be as succinct as possible while still really teaching you everything about really what we represent and really what separates LBC from everyone else doing macro tracking and everyone else being obsessed with MyFitnessPal. Over the years, we've never, been a MyFitnessPal tracker, and instead we have our food substitution calculator, which is going to simplify things. And then on top of that, really teaching you how to create meal cards and showing you how to use your current template with our meal cards just to make this feel more like a lifestyle. So today this lesson is all about our meal card method and really taking you from using the substitution calculator for simple subs to how to use a skinny taste recipe. Okay, so we know that we have to have a plan. I mean, we have to all accept that, we must have a plan to follow. None of us that was one of the things that people really crave when they get their meal plan is just knowing what to eat. It takes the guesswork out, so it was great. And it was great when we were given, macros, and macros became the big buzzword, 15 years ago, because it taught us that we didn't have to follow like a meal plan strictly in that, man, I got to eat the same thing over and over. But it also taught us that the hyper tracking is not sustainable. After several years of that, then suddenly we started to see people with the tracking issues and feeling like it's just, I'm either on or off, I'm tracking or not. So, we wanted to take a different approach. And deciding meal to meal with macros is just not sustainable. You start your day off and maybe you plug your numbers in, and then next thing you know, you're adjusting the next one because you just let your feelings vote at this one. And over time, you're obsessed with the numbers and you're really just at the mercy of your MyFitnessPal. So I'm going to teach you today how to take our template and first start with some simple, easy subs using our food sub calculator, no more, MyFitnessPal, and then graduating to the meal cards over time. And maybe you are watching this before you're even at like the 2 week or 4 week point of watching or of following the templates. That's okay. It's still good to learn this now. Okay. So we know that we start with the Look Like You Train template, or if you're a client, a one-to-one, diet that we've built for you. And pretty much everyone, in the group, everyone is starting at testing the caloric base, testing the deficit, 11 times body weight, really just establishing that caloric baseline to really see how the body responds, right? And you really want to keep it simple in these first 2 weeks. So as you'll see in the other modules where I've taught, when you're creating the template to, make it your own, you want to ideally have 2 subs at each meal already established. So when you look at your template, you want to see that you've got 1, 2 options, here, 1, 2 options, so that in those first couple of weeks, you're really just following the template with those options, knowing that you can mix in different vegetables and change up your marinades, but really just keeping it simple. So for those first 2 weeks, you want to stay at 95 to 100% compliance, because remember, we're testing this caloric deficit. And if you start to, remove some of the variables that we're testing, we really don't know then what's working, what's not, right? So those first 2 weeks, you want to keep that really high compliance. After the first 2 weeks, if you're a one-to-one client, that's when we officially allow you to start adding in your simple subs and, just allowing for a little more flexibility. All right. So typically this is going to be based on the most often chosen meal setup, right? So you're going to go through your template and start making those simple subs, ground beef for chicken, turkey for ham, like whatever it may be, right? But you, at least on that initial one, wanted to have at least 2 established, okay? And you're going to see that calories and total protein are listed at each meal. And I say total because if you were to go just look up, 85 grams of chicken breast, it's not 30 grams of protein, but the total protein at this meal is the 30 grams. And this matters because when you start to create some meal cards based on recipes, we have a formula for that. So you want to make sure at the very least you've got 2 set up. Now at that 2 week point, you're going to start, adding in some subs here and there where you're really seeing what you're missing, or maybe you go shopping, you're like, hey, you know what? I've been having chicken. I want to do pork tenderloin tonight, right? And you start to ask yourself, hey, what would, in a perfect day, not just like my timing look, but the food items that I have? Because now that you've kind of established a couple weeks of just putting your head down and, doing the work in terms of like follow through and high meal compliance, then you can start to ask yourself, well, what other foods would I like to have? Where do I want to get creative, right? So in this case, like my client, and in the templates that you see in Look Like You Train, those calories, they're not like exactly evenly, broken apart across that day. You're going to see that you have at least one meal that's got that 400 calorie meals so that you can use some of my meal cards. But if you don't want it that way, you can change it. Like we, of course, when you're a one-to-one client, we are customizing it exactly based on how you like to live. So like this client, she wanted 5 meals. She wanted 2 of them being smaller. She wanted me to implement her coffee creamer. She said that she preferred no meats at the snack meals and doesn't like eggs, and she likes to have sandwiches at lunch and a bigger dinner meal if possible. So I created her first initial meal template, and she didn't want anything else but the oats at meal 1. Otherwise, I would have given her 2 options. So we created it like this. Now, her first 2 weeks, she needs to really stick to this as is, adding in, like I said, some seasonings and things like that, different vegetables. And then at the 2 weeks, she can start taking this and creating those simple subs, right? Because we all know that we need the flexibility. What made IIFYM, if it fits in your macros and macro tracking, so popular was everyone was so tired of like a coach just giving them a meal plan and being like, eat this for the next 2 weeks till we check in, right? And then we started to demonize certain foods. We thought that chicken breast was superior to something else, or beef, or the timing of when I had my rice, and if I combined it with this meal, that made it perfect. Like it became more for us to think about. And so the flexibility started to become a hindrance because the hyper tracking is exhausting. So you want to see that even going to the food sub calculator and subbing in and out all day long is going to be very similar to MyFitnessPal, maybe a bit simplified, but you don't want to get in the habit of doing that all the time. That's why I say establish your first 2-week one, and then at the 2 weeks, start subbing in the simple ones using the food sub calculator, right? You'll just, and knowing that you're initially just starting with some simple subs. Now, at the 4-week point is when I really say, listen, this is when you can really open the meal cards and start putting them on actual cards. The first couple weeks, you're possibly just going to the meal, the food sub calculator and subbing in. Okay, I want to have this for this. Instead of steak, I want to have this. But once you have established at least 4 weeks at, I say 90 to 95% compliance, then you can start really using those meal cards. So in the calculator, let's say on your original meal card, you've got chicken breast, couscous, and cashews, right? You want to make some simple subs. You're just technically just going protein to protein, carb for carb, and fat for fat, right? So you're just taking that original, meal template. Let's see if we've got a chicken breast one up here, but like this chicken, rice, olive oil, same thing. We're taking the protein, carb, and the fat, and we're subbing them out. And then you can just make it very simple by putting it on a card. Much better than writing a little note and seeing this still as numbers in your head. What you want to do is you want to use your meal template and create cards that match the original calories within 10. I mean, I really even say like 5, because if it's like 10, I typically am like, then I want to readjust this and shave off a little bit here or whatever. But it has to be within 10 calories technically, and you need to ensure that the total protein at that meal is at least 80% of the original amount, okay? So what that would look like up here, let's come back up to this one here. So all of these, this is, 25 grams, 31. You would need to hit at least 80%. Now, you don't need to know math to know how to do this. You literally can just ask your phone, hey, what's 80% of 25, right? And it's going to tell you, it's 20. So on the new meal card, the total protein has to at least hit 20, okay? So let's come back down here. So you want to first start by creating simple sub cards. Now, if you're from like my era, like we loved the good old index card, recipe, gatherer, whatever you want to call it. So I am an OG. I like to put things on my index card. So I first start by putting the original always on the, backside. Okay. So it's going to say, meal 3 here. Here's the OG template. I had chicken, couscous, and cashews on here. The total's already on the meal card. It shows you, and it shows you the total protein. What I like to do then is just what I showed you up here is I go through and I'm going to now write, like if you had chicken on your original plan and the couscous and the cashews, you're going to write those things next to it. My chicken was 196 calories and 39 protein. My couscous was 149 calories and 31 carbs. And my cashews is 27 grams and 157 calories and 12 grams of fat. These are not going to matter as much, that the 31 grams of carbs and 12 grams of fat, as you create meal cards, because when you're just subbing item for item, it's pretty easy. But you definitely want to know those things. So you're going to take out an index card, and on the back side, you'll list the OG meal, okay, as seen in the picture. On the front of the card, you're going to list the meal that you're subbing along with the calories and the total protein for that meal, okay? Now, how you can look that up, for example, the total protein, is I went to the food sub calculator, and in fact, I have, where's my note here? And I went and I looked up the top sirloin. The top sirloin had 34 grams of protein in it. The russet potatoes had like 4.9, actually it was 3.9, so 4 grams there. And then the cheddar cheese actually had 9 grams. So that came to a total of 48 grams of protein. As you can see at the original here, I had 47, so I'm actually going to end up with more protein in my meal card sub. So this is technically an approved sub, right? So I gave you the example. So for example, if your OG meal says 500 calories and 47 grams of protein, that means when subbing, the meal's total protein coming from all foods at that meal, not just the protein, it needs to be no less than 38 grams of the subbed meal. This is why when if you're following a recipe, you literally just have to look at what they say is the total protein for the recipe. And this is why we did it this way, knowing that we want to take that total amount and you just need to hit 80%. Okay. So once you've created a few sub for subs, this is like, taking your, like I did here, chicken for steak and couscous for potatoes and cashews for cheese. I definitely recommend, still like even naming them. This starts to make it feel less like a diet. I love when I pull this one out and it's like cheese or steak and cheesy potatoes. Oh, how funny, I wrote them opposite here. It says cheesy steak potatoes there, but mine here says steak and cheesy potatoes. Even my kids, when we're meal planning, it just doesn't seem like it's dieting, and it certainly doesn't seem like it to my mind, because the numbers are so small on here that I'm really focused more on the food item I'm eating, and I'm getting away from those numbers, okay? So once you've created some simple ones, then you want to create some for when you're out and about. So like I love Chick-fil-A. You're going to see that on my meal card database that, I like to go there. You're just going to have to do some math where you just get out a piece of paper and go through the website or whatever the item is, and you're going to total it all up and just make sure again that you hit the protein amount. So I started playing with the one that I had 500 calories and first did that grilled chicken sandwich. It was 355, but only 26 grams of protein. So I already knew, oh man, I'm not going to hit my protein if I don't add another addition. Sure, there's going to be trace amounts in other food items that maybe I'll get, but it's not going to give me enough to at least hit, remember 80% at my meal, it had to be 80% of the 47. So then I came back through, added in the 5 count of grilled nuggets. It was only 80 calories. That gave me 16 more grams of protein. Now I know I have more than enough. And I'm only at 435 calories, so I've still got technically 65 left. I don't know how I did my math there of saying, it used to be, but it's 65. I looked up a medium fruit cup. They're 70, so I'm within 5 calories. Remember the 10 calorie range. So now I can have a medium fruit cup. I then list it all on a card. My OG called for 500 calories and 48 protein. I'm having 495. Actually, it's 505 because I need to adjust that. And 42 grams of protein. So I hit it okay, right? This now is a good sub. Now, building in my meal cards, not all of the meal cards are going to be good subs for you, meaning they're all 400 calories, but do they all hit at least 80% of your total protein? So you're going to always need to go through that database that, we're going to allow people to add their own meal cards to this once I approve them, because that's the way we make sure that they really are, in fact, what they say they are. But you're still going to have to do your job in this database to see, like, do I hit the protein threshold? So let's say that, here, this meal card, 400 calories, 34 protein, 400 calories, 32. I know that's going to be within it. Let's look at the second one here. It's 400 calories, but only 28 grams of protein. So again, you're going to just, ask Siri or ask your phone, what's 80% of 34? It's going to tell you that you need to have no less than 27 grams. So you barely just made it with this one having 28. So it's considered a good approved sub. If they don't hit it and you still have calories left, you can always stack another protein source there when you're creating meal cards. But these are the two things that you must match up when you're doing them. And you'll have access, like I said, to my PDF, but you need to still make sure that it matches up with your amounts that you can use. Now, building in recipes, this is where I find that, it's just been, I don't use a lot of recipes when I'm in a fat loss phase. I'll be honest, I don't always trust these things. Recipes are harder, casseroles, things like that. But when I'm in maintenance and I have a little more, room and wiggle room, I think it's like the best thing to create meal cards around that. Now, how does that work? I love Skinny Taste, and I love most recipe websites require them to do the calories per serving and protein. So I know that this one here, this chicken marbella, is per serving 323 and 38 grams of protein. So really high protein. So I already know coming through this, I'll look, okay, well, this meal, I have 330 calories there. So I could technically eat that there, and it is more than enough protein, right? At meal 5, though, I don't have enough calories there. This one is 323, this is 300. It's not going to be enough. Now, over time, if you're like, man, Amy, every single time I go for recipes, like, they're just always higher, you may want to think about long-term shifting some calories to, your bigger meals. You can do it yourself I've showed you how to add and remove, meals from the templates in another video, or you can, upgrade into one. We do two things. One, we can build you a custom diet, just a one-time custom diet where we put all this in here, taking your needs, making sure you have subs for them. And that's just you still going on your own accountability wise. It's just a one-time diet. Or you can come into one-to-one coaching where we build it out for you. We continue to help you create meal cards, but all of this is totally doable on your own, and people do it in the group all the time. So my challenge to you is to go through your template and first, start creating some simple sub cards, right? Make sure you get them on actual cards. This makes a big difference. Then go through your template and create some that you need for when you're on the go. It's a lot easier to follow our meal plan when we're home, let's face it. But if you had some options for when you're out, like my meal 1, this egg or egg whites or oats, if I'm not home and I need a non-perishable, if I'm at chemo treatment or whatever, I now have this where, hey, it's not my favorite, but it's 60 grams of jerky and 190 calories of rice cakes. I mean, it does the job. This is something where I don't have to worry about refrigerating it, and my brain now has an option versus me waking up that morning and not knowing what I'm going to have and just already maybe feeling overwhelmed with that. This is where the cards come into place, and really having an on-the-go meal card for every meal, because you never know when you're going to have an emergency or something come up. I always like to know that I have some options, to run to 7-Eleven and get a protein bar or whatever. So go through and do that. And like I said, be sure to take the time. Like, it's not enough to just write it in your, phone that you're going to have, instead of your chicken, couscous, and cashews, you're going to have a turkey sandwich and, a side of it. Take the time to write this out so you see it all on a card. And then when you go through your meal planning for the week, you're like, oh, I'm going to pull this card. I'm going to do this one this week a couple times. And oh, I'm going to pull this card and do this. And it just starts to feel more like a lifestyle. So we know that the long-term success comes from seeing this as a lifestyle. You've got to put the foods in here that you love. Otherwise, you're actually just seeing it as a diet. You're not seeing this as a long-term commitment, because whether you're in a deficit or, no longer dieting and it's your goal, these principles in terms of like eating regularly, prioritizing protein still need to be there. And the meal card method is a way to no longer feel like you're constantly just obsessed with numbers and tracking numbers. I feel like I'm just tracking recipes. All right. So I hope you love this and really implement this. Any questions, feel free to come to the group and ask them specifically.